All righty. We did it. Good morning, good afternoon, hello,
Hello.
hi. Hi everybody. Good to see you all again. It's been a minute. I've been busy and then I've been sick, so that's fun. Um, wow, look at this. We're here today. It's I don't know what is it 9 in the morning here. Hi everybody. Oh look, Simon. So Bruno meet Simon. Simon meet Bruno. You probably already met. I don't know. It's a small world over there in Belgium. Um, Simon is, of course, one of the good eggs in the ecosystem, and just glad he's here. So anyway, my friends, yeah, wow, it is a 2nd November. I've been trying to talk to you, Bruno, for more than a month. Uh, this conversation has been fairly roundabout, right? I actually reached out to you originally because I wanted to talk to somebody. I knew already that you weren't still with iText, the organization, but you were nice enough to point me in the right direction because I wanted to help contribute some hints to support native images, right? And you connected me with some folks, some really nice folks on the iText team, and we did it. We actually, as far as I know, that stuff has been we developed it and it works. So I don't know if it's been in interest yet, but it'll get there. The power of open source, right? Um, and then coincident with that, I was also uh, poking you, hoping you would reluctantly agree to an interview uh, with me. So you're not alone. I think so. Let me see. There's some questions here. Why am I alone here? I don't think you're alone, buddy. Just join us on YouTube. It's fine. The water's fine. Um, there's so people are watching us from different platforms, including Twitch and then YouTube and whatever. I don't know, Twitter, LinkedIn. So thanks to everybody who's joining us. So anyway, I reached out to you. Uh, right back at you. So, so yeah, like I reached out to you. And I was hoping you'd join me for a discussion because you're like a legend, a freaking deity in the Java ecosystem. And before the show, I was talking to you about just what it meant to come up in the Java ecosystem in the last 20 plus odd years, which is where my first professional work was in 2002. I was doing small stuff, but my first full-time job in Java was 2002. Um, and it's just a rare privilege. I mean, iText and the technology you created has been a part of that discussion for as long as I can remember, you know, um, and I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. So can you introduce yourself so that I don't screw it up, and then we'll get into it?
Okay, I'm Bruno Lowagie. I'm born in Belgium. I had my first computer in 1982. It was a Texas Instruments 99 a home computer. So my first programming language wasn't Java, but Texas Instruments Basic.
Nice.
And I didn't study computer sciences. I wrote like a database system when I was 14 and a word processing software at 15, something like that, or vice versa. But by the time I was 16, I was fed up with computers and I started painting oil on canvas. But I wanted to study painting or arts, but my parents said, well, you should do the admission exam for the civil engineering. And so I did what my parents asked, and then I passed from the first try. And then they said, well, you passed your exam. Why wouldn't you start studying civil engineering? So
Right.
actually, I'm a civil engineer in architecture, so designing buildings, not software. But then when I graduated, I returned to my first love, to programming, and well, I changed jobs 3 times in the first 2 years. But then in '98, I was hired by Ghent University, and that's where I started writing my PDF library. And actually, in one of my previous jobs, that was like giving training to the new hires, and
Right.
so that was in '96, and that was when I asked my employer, hey, if I give a 2-week course on Java, how much time do I get to study it? And they gave me 3 weeks time to read the book. If you have the manual, you're the expert. And so I gave my first Java lessons in '96 to a group of people where we kind of programmed a network connect 4. So you had the
Right.
server socket and 2 client sockets, and then one at a time you had to kind of make a move, and that was the first one of the first Java applications that I made.
After 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Like, that's the power of Java. If you knew anything else, then it was very natural for people to get up and running
I
with
think
Java.
that was version 1.0.2, so it was kind of you could still learn it in 2 weeks.
And I'll bet you that code, if you were to unearth it today, would probably still run on Java 21 or 22. You know?
Yeah, maybe it was very simple code, just a server socket listening and client sockets connecting to it, and
yeah, exactly. It's really portable. I love Java for that. I am looking for this. Oops, this. So okay, so you had this code. You had 2 weeks to learn a thing, and then you did a training course, and that was 1996. So again, 20 what is that? 27 years ago. I mean, my goodness, the history of Java is only 28, 29 years. So
it's Java. It dates from 1995. So, but we were close to Sun Microsystems. So that was one of the. So my employer was in Zaventem, and Sun Microsystems was in Diegem, and so yeah, we got like early access to stuff.
Sun Microsystems.
Well,
Pour one out.
The Belgian subsidiary of Sun Microsystems.
Right. Okay, so so that's interesting. You were working in other languages. You learned Java, and you did it. You did the training. So the training was a means to get get permission to go to the thing, right?
Yeah, so I gave courses in C++ and other languages, and SQL and stuff like that. And I saw this new language, Java, and I really wanted to kind of get time to learn that language. And the only way to get that time was to kind of ask, can I give a 2-week course in Java?
This was resume driven development. I see what's happening. So the training version of that.
I didn't know Java would become as big as it is today. So it was.
It's huge. It's huge, and it's kind of interesting where, like I just mentioned, the original reason I reached out to you was because I wanted to help I wanted to do a very, very little, just the tiniest bit of work, literally a few hours, just to add some things to iText so that it could do native images. So now you can render a PDF using iText and this native image support in 10 milliseconds. The whole program starts up, renders, and quits in 10 milliseconds. You know, like, and takes up whatever 5 megabytes of RAM or something. You know, like that's still the same code, still the same Java code you wrote decades ago. It's just now much faster. You know, it's just an amazing language, just an amazing ecosystem we get to be in. Okay, so why stay with Java? You learned it. Did you start doing consulting with it? Is there like or training with it, and people?
So when I was hired for Ghent University, the ad said like you have to learn Perl, and all the development has to be done in Perl. But I succeeded in convincing my employer that we needed Java, because making a server-side application in Perl, I mean, that's not really future-proof. Well, nope. Back then, I know back then they really loved Perl at the university, but I managed. So I remember that when we started the application, JServe, the server was still in beta. So, and by the time the application that I wrote was discontinued, JServe was end of life. So that was like that was a very good choice we made. So the application we had to write was I and another colleague who were hired from the private sector had to rewrite all the software for the student administration. So professors entering grades, administrators calculating the final grade, looking if there are sufficient credits, printing diplomas and stuff. Previously, that was a Clipper program on a diskette. So every professor would get a diskette with the program program on it, and with an extraction of the student database. And so they would take examinations and then put the grades on a diskette and then hand in the diskette, and then the grades were extracted from the diskette into the main database. But of course, when professors had like 500 students, those are different diskettes, and sometimes a student had 2 different grades on different diskettes, or a student didn't have a grade, didn't he go to the exam, and then the application in Clipper, it changed multiple times a day. But then there were professors who had like the version of last week, but the data structure had changed, so that was a complete mess. And I was hired to kind of to solve that problem. And so together with my colleague, we made an intranet application. So with
Right.
JServe as the application server, and people could log in and have access to the courses that they were teaching, to the students who were following those courses, to the grades that they had given. And one of the things that I had to solve was, back when it was still on a diskette, professors could print lists with students on an HP printer. It couldn't be a network printer. The printer had to be attached to the computer, and it could only be an HP printer. So I had convinced my employer we shouldn't use Perl, we should use Java. But then I made another promise. I said, well, we're 1998. PDF exists since 93. Java exists since 95. There should be some software around to provide PDF documents. And so I said, well, forget about printing lists on an HP printer. I'm going to give you PDFs, so online generated PDF. And little did I know that PDF back then was mainly something of the desktop. So people used Illustrator, or they created the document in Word, and then they hit the button, and then a PDF was created. What I needed was PDFs that were created on the fly in an intranet application. So you have a database with a student, his curriculum, and then all the grades that he has, and at the end of the year. So back then, the Ghent University had about 23,000 students. So you would have to be able to push on a button and then have a 23,000 page PDF with every page would be like a report card for a student. And so I really looked for a Java library, and there were 2. A PDF that was a guy, Peter Mount, who had written something where, if you know Graphics 2D, it was very similar to Graphics 2D. So you would create
Java
the Java Graphics 2D. So you would put things on the page, but that wasn't really helpful for me. And then there was something called PJ from Etimon. But what I really needed was something that was fast and that could render tables in an intuitive way. So all those lists with students and grades and courses that were all tables. So I needed something that was specialized in tables. And the first library I wrote, so it was like publishing data from a database, student data.
Mail merge.
Something like that, yeah. And so I didn't find a suitable library, so I had to write one myself. And I remember in the Christmas holidays of 1998, I read the PDF reference, and that was like about 600 pages back then. So that today it's much more. And and I wrote my first library in 6 weeks' time, and I really hated PDF because it wasn't like any programming languages that I knew. But of course, afterwards I realized, PDF isn't a programming language, it's a document format. And so I had to maintain my own first library. It was called RUG PDF. RUG was the former abbreviation of Ghent University. So Universiteit Ghent. And there were some people who used it, so I put it online immediately, because that was what we did.
SourceForge?
I don't know. It wasn't SourceForge yet. I think I joined SourceForge in the year 2000, so I was late. But it was just on a university server. So I put the code out, but I had to maintain my own source code for 2 years. I was the only one who understood the code, and so I really hated that, because if someone needed to they said, well, let's move this like half an inch to the right, and then I had to do all this coding, and I said, well, this is terrible. And after 2 years of maintaining my own really shitty library, I said, but no, I understand why I hated PDF. I hated PDF because I didn't understand PDF. So I should throw away my code and start from scratch. And I asked my employer, can I have time to kind of rewrite everything? And they said, but we have something that works. Why would you rewrite that? If it's not broken, why fix it? But
Yeah, famous
then
last words.
then again, I had to finish that project in time. I had not taken any vacation days, and in 2000 I had like I don't know 20 vacation days that I had to take them all before the month of April, or else I would lose my vacation days. And
Gee.
so I said, well, if I can't rewrite the PDF library during office hours, I will take my vacation and I will write. So in January and February, I wrote the first version of iText in January, February of the year 2000, and I released. Well, it was version 0.3. That was the first public release of iText on Valentine's Day in the year 2000. So, of
Wow.
my wife often gets the question if I say, well, the first iText release was on Valentine's Day. My wife always gets like the pity, like, is that what your husband was doing on Valentine's Day?
Oh God. Oh, that's so sad. But also good for the world, but not so good for the
And
significant other.
so once iText was the main difference between my first library and iText was that to use iText, you didn't have to know anything about the PDF specification. So I added this abstraction layer of all these higher level objects. Back then it was called chunk. Now it's text and paragraph and a table class with cell elements. And so you could just say, I create a table, I add cells, and then the table would get populated, and then it would be rendered. And
So this is what you're describing is incredibly difficult because the PDF itself gives you it supports this, but you're basically you're designing a rendering engine.
yeah.
And you don't even get control over the final output. You have to like render in a certain way so that something else will do the right thing, so that the PDF viewer ultimately will be correct.
You have to position every element that you're adding to the document. You have to kind of position it at exact coordinates and distribute text automatically. So that was the main challenge, to add this abstraction layer so that people would not be annoyed with move to the next line. No, we need like space between words has to be that amount versus space between characters and stuff like that. So you could do this with iText, but if you didn't want to get confronted with that kind of code, you didn't have to.
This kind of stuff. So let's come at it just ever so briefly to talk about sort of the other side of it, which is what is PDF? Why is PDF? And PDF, to my memory, to my recollection, came out in the early 90s, and you said 93. That sounds about right. And the idea was it was a container around PostScript, which in turn was a rendering technology for printers in the 80s, and it allowed you to write graphics code that would be the exact same code that you'd write and render for your printer. So you could take the same. It used to be that, like you said, the HP. It used to be every printer had its own rendering technology.
And so PostScript was a programming language. So if, for instance, you had a 200-page document and you needed page 100, you had to kind of run through the program, generate the first 99 pages before you had page 100. And with PDF, you have a structure where you can immediately say, I need page 100. Give me all the resources for page 100. And you have page 100 without having to know anything about the rest of the document.
Nice.
An example, for instance, there's a car manufacturer so when you buy a car, if it's produced on that day or a week later, it can be a slightly different car. But all the specifications of every car, so that leaves that factory, has a PDF with how was this car built, and that's like a 100,000 page PDF. You cannot even open it in Adobe Reader, but if something is, so Adobe Reader crashes or your computer crashes if you open it, but if something is wrong with that car, they can pull out that PDF and ask like this should be on page 90,000, something like that, and then they pull out that PDF, that page, and they have the exact specification of how that car was built, for instance. So that's one PDF use. So when I first wrote iText, it was just to create student lists and report cards and diplomas.
Right.
I couldn't imagine all the kinds of usages that later users would use iText for or PDF for. That was like
Well, so
kind of beyond my
well,
comprehension.
well, that's just it, right? So in the late 90s and the early 2000s up until the 2010s, I would say that computer science was dominated by digitization, right? This was taking existing paper workflows and digitizing them. Is that fair? Right? And so the school report card thing was exactly that. We've got a thing, we want to do it digitally, more efficiently, let the computer do the work.
Yeah,
and
I remember companies where they had a policy change. All documents should be distributed as PDFs. And what the secretaries did was they had the Word document, they printed it, they scanned the prints, and they had their PDF. But of course, that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted digital born PDFs, of course. And like one of the main disadvantages of PDF, sometimes one thing that I often heard back then was PDF is where data goes to die, in the sense that you have your database with your students and your grade and the grades of the students and the total result, and then you make a PDF of it, but the structure can get lost. So especially back in those days, you no longer had the structure, so you needed kind of a smart system to kind of scan the document to know, okay, this is the name of a course, this is a grade. But things changed a lot over the years, and like in 2012 we had the PDF UA standard, where you had the rendering for like humans who have to see the document with their eyes, who have to read it from print or from screen. But PDF UI also adds semantics. So UI is
for accessibility,
universal accessibility. So that screen readers or assistive technology knows of, for instance, can navigate through a table, because if you read a table, you don't read it just from left to right. Sometimes you have to stay within a cell, and so PDF UA knows. So the PDF isn't just about rendering it like graphically, but also PDF UA also knows about the structure and knows this is the first cell in the first row. This is and with special software, you can say, oh no, skip to the fifth row. I want the sixth column in the fifth row. So PDF is there are many different flavors of PDF. You have the scanned PDFs that are you need OCR to know what's in it. You have the PDFs where data goes to die, but you also have the smart PDFs that have the complete structure of the document.
And this is actually so in my original experience with PDF, it was a digital photocopy. That was what you used it for. It was exactly the same thing you would put on a piece of paper, but pixelized. That's it. And who cares how you got it there, as long as you had it as a PDF, you could do anything with it. You could send it to the press, you could print it out in your laser writer, you could whatever. But what you couldn't do was use it as a data carrier in of itself. So, and I was watching recently the Apache LibreOffice suite. They had a conference of their, like a little internal conference, like a little developers focused, people on the teams, on the projects, working on the projects, on the code bases, talking to each other, proposing things. And they had a very interesting discussion recently about is LibreOffice a PDF editor? And to be honest with you, the words to me sounded very. I didn't think you could. I thought that was the whole point. It was kind of like a terminus format. It was the end of the line for the data in that format. And they were saying, well, we can import it, but the filter that imports it doesn't lay it out very well in LibreOffice, obviously, because it's not a full desktop publishing application with graphics fidelity and all that. And then you can export the thing that you make changes to, but it doesn't. You can't really round trip. If you take a nice brochure from something designed in InDesign, import it into LibreOffice, and then export it, it's not going to look the same, you know?
If, for instance, if you have a subsetted font and you introduce a new character that isn't in the subset,
Right.
you need that original font somewhere. So there are a lot of difficulties. That's the first one that comes to mind, but there are many others.
Right. So that in that respect, I was like, I didn't know this was a thing that people did, was editing. But I know Adobe Acrobat Reader will, Adobe Acrobat will let you, you know, add text, add stamp signatures, do some basic things like this. But I don't really think of it as a thing you can edit. Really, it's a bit of a band-aid after that. On the other hand, there are also, you mentioned smart PDFs, and a lot of times I'm sure people have seen this where you get a form and you can fill it out, and somehow when you make changes to the PDF form, it goes to a server and there's actual data being synchronized across the internet.
Yeah, there are different flavors. There used to be XFA, the XML forms architecture. Those are the ones, if you open them in a browser like in Firefox or Chrome, where it says, where it gives like a standard stub that says, I can't open this PDF. That's because it's actually XML inside a PDF that is rendered only in Adobe Reader, but that was deprecated in PDF 2.0. So ISO 32002 deprecated that. And then you have the Acrobat forms, so Acro forms, but those are rather limited in the sense that the coordinates of your area where you can change something are fixed on the page. So if you say, well, let's say you have like where this is the man, this is the, well, these are the two partners, and these are the children, and there's only space for 5 children, and you have 6 children. Well, you can't do anything because the Acrobat form, the Acro form doesn't allow it. So there, but yeah, that's one of the difficulties. PDF is a really huge standard, and I remember back in the days of the mailing list or on Stack Overflow, people asking questions like, "But I've seen this working. Why doesn't this work with my document?" Like the thing you said, like doing the round trip. There are situations where, like for financial statements, where we create a PDF in a way that it's still vector data, so people can still read it on their screen in a reliable way. But once you try to extract the data, it's all gibberish because we change we change the encoding. We use a random encoding, and so for instance, an A corresponds with the pound sign, and a B. So when you extract that data, you don't really know what's there. We just match the glyph of the A with a random other character. And
no.
So then there are people who say, "Oh, you claim that iText can extract data from PDFs, but I've tried to extract data from this PDF, and it doesn't make sense, the result." And then you look at the PDF and you say, "Hey, but this was intentionally by the person who created the PDF. They wanted to obfuscate the data so that if Google kind of spiders that document, knows like it's this financial statement of Bruno Lowagie, and people Google for Bruno Lowagie, it's never going to turn up because the PDF doesn't if you extract the data from the PDF, it doesn't really have the string Bruno Lowagie.
Right. It's not strings anymore. It's just glyphs. It's vectors that look like characters.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, and it's still pretty efficient. Hold on 1 second. We're having...
I think they're going to get you.
I think somebody's having a very bad day, and I hope that the ambulance reaches them very quickly. Okay, so anyway, I all that to say, PDF is super important, but more often than not, like your original use case, I think of it as a digital receipt, right? It's the thing I hold on to for contract, pixel perfect,
It's
dried ink.
reliable.
Yeah.
You have PDF-A for archiving, ensuring that if you look at PDF in 10 years, it will still look the same. And then you have all the PADES standards, which are the electronic signature standards that
Right.
kind of make sure that the integrity is preserved, that no one changed it. So it's really a very broad standard. And when I started working on PDF, I didn't know that iText would become such a huge library with all those
It's
different features.
amazing. I was, as part of this process of learning about how to change it to make it work with GraalVM, I was pleased to sit there and play with it. And there's, via integration through Bounty Castle, you can do encrypted documents, and you can also do tables and QR codes and barcodes and just everything. It's just this incredible library. So let's talk about that. Okay, so when did you change this project that was at your university? When did it officially become iText?
So February 14, 2000, that was the first public release of iText. And I think shortly after I moved it to SourceForge, because before it was just on the university server. And initially I released it under the LGPL because in my first jobs, I was outsourced to the Flemish government and everything was free software. So the term open source wasn't even coined back then. That's only in February 98. And so the only type of licenses I knew were the GPL style licenses. And so
Right.
I Rug PDF was released as LGPL and iText was released as LGPL. But then I think I saw the first adoption or the first articles on IBM websites and SAP websites in 2002. And also I received questions from people who like more the legal people who didn't like the LGPL and said, well, we'd rather have the MPL, and so the Mozilla Public License. And so Mozilla was kind of instrumental in making open source big. And I read the license and I didn't see that much difference. I'm not a lawyer. And so I think very early on, maybe already in 2000, 2001, we had people could choose between the LGPL and the MPL. And I was very idealistic, and I said, well, I have my job at university, and that's just a side project. That's just a hobby project. And yeah, I kept it free as in free beer for 8 years. So up until 2008, there was no company for iText. At one point, there was a company who offered to buy iText. And then I went to like an M&A consultant and he said, yeah, what's the name of your company? I said, I don't have a company. And he said, well, what are you going to sell? So that conversation died quite dead because I didn't understand what the M&A guy from the buyer was talking about. And I didn't find anyone in Belgium who wanted to help me. And so what changed was a couple of things. So I got more and more questions. So people got more and more demanding. So technical questions and like, we need this feature. And I said, yeah, but I do this in weekends. And then there was one large, a Fortune 500 company who sent me like a bundle with a dozen pages saying, can you sign this for us? And I said, why would I sign this for you? Well, we are using iText and we want to kind of, we don't want to be liable for your software. So we want you to kind of tell our customers that if something goes wrong, that we, the Fortune 500 company, isn't responsible, but that you are responsible for that code. So I never signed it because I said, hey, you're not even paying me, so why would I sign this? But the worst thing that happened was that in Belgium there are certain criteria, and if you meet those criteria, you are self-employed. So the number of people or companies that you work for is one criterion. So I was working for IBM, SAP, everyone was using iText. The freedom to decide when you perform the work, I did this in my spare time, the degree of continuity. So I had been working on iText since 2000. The level of investment, so I had my own website that I paid for, and then the level of risk that is involved of your activity. And so more and more I got legal questions. So I started kind of thinking, hey, am I not at risk if something goes wrong? Won't they sue me? But so these criteria, the Social Security Service in Belgium said, well, based on these criteria, you are self-employed and you haven't been
Yeah.
paying any Social Security contributions. So they
Uh-oh.
went back in time and they said, well, here are so many years of Social Security contributions, and since you didn't pay them when you started, you have to pay 7% interest on the last couple of years and 12% interest on those years. And so I said, what is happening to me? And then they said, well, you should really start a company. And so they waived the interest, so I didn't have to pay the 7% and 12% interest, but it was still a big bill that we had to pay for the Social Security Administration to be happy with the situation. And so I started the company in January 2008 together with my wife. But then another thing struck us in February 2008. Our son was diagnosed with cancer, so bone cancer. So for
Oh
the
no.
whole, we
Leukemia?
almost went, no, bone cancer. So he, part of his knee was removed, and he has no prosthesis and stuff like that. So it was like the worst year of my life, 2008. But
Yeah.
after 18 chemotherapy sessions, and like he had surgery every year, because every year his one leg was growing and his other leg didn't grow anymore. So he had kind of, for 6 or 7 years, every summer he went to the hospital to have an extension to his leg. And so his muscles had to be, because so he couldn't bend his leg after every operation. So that was like the worst year in our lives. And
I'm so sorry.
we had that company. We had to pay Social Security. We had to pay kind of taxes, but we didn't have any business, because I was more in the hospital than elsewhere, and everyone who promised, if you start a business, we will buy a license or we will kind of support you financially. They didn't do that, because they said, hey, that guy is in the hospital. He's not going to that's not going to succeed. And so that was a really bad year. But then in 2009, you probably know Andrew Binstock. He was
Yeah.
editor-in-chief of Java News at some
Oracle.
point. So
Yeah.
in 2007, so I had written 2 books for Manning. Well, I had written back then 1 book for Manning Publications in 2006, iText in Action, the first edition. And in 2007, in March 2007, Andrew came to Belgium for a conference, and he said, well, I have to be in Brussels. Ghent is nearby. I'll do a stop in Ghent. I'll buy you lunch, and you sign my copy of your book. And instead of just signing his copy of my book, I gave him the touristic tour of Ghent, and we became
Right.
friends. And so when he saw my wife and I struggle in 2008, he said, well, I have to help you. And he said, you made the mistake to start in Belgium. You should have started with us in Silicon Valley. And he started iText Software Corporation in, I think, February 2009. And together we sold the first licenses. So we had a dual license system. Back then, the bank and insurance companies, they were really afraid of PDF. So not of PDF, of open source. So some of these companies had a policy that they wouldn't allow the use of open source. How times have changed.
Yeah.
but back then, so there was an insurance company on the East Coast and a bank on the West Coast, and the developers had introduced iText, but they had the problem that iText was not allowed in the company due to that policy of, you are not allowed to use open source. You need a business relationship with a software vendor. And so those were the first customers. So together with Andrew and the legal department of those customers, we created a commercial license that could stand next to the LGPL MPL. And so we did our first sales together, Andrew and I. And then once we had those 2 first sales and we had that end user license, for me, as an engineer, I thought that the software was the product. The software is what we're selling. It took a while for Andrew to teach me that the real product was the end user license agreement. So the insurance that when they used iText and something went wrong, that the company would kind of jump in and solve the problem. And so we had some salespeople on commission who kind of went through our list of potential buyers. And the first year in 2009, we had about 300K in invoiced revenue. And so that was in the first 3 quarters of 2009. But then the fourth quarter, the list, the salespeople on commission had kind of completed the list, and we had almost no sales. I think maybe $1,000 in the fourth quarter, and there was a lot of pressure on me from the salespeople, but also from Andrew, saying, "Well, the LGPL makes it really easy for people to use iText in a commercial context, because it's like it's only if you change something in the iText code, you have to contribute it back. But the source code that is built around iText, that can be commercial closed source proprietary software." And so after long discussions, I decided that I gave in, and we changed. So we went from iText 2, which was compatible with Java, to iText 5, which was compatible with with Java version 5. So that's why we
Right.
jumped from 2 to 5. Also because we had a C# version that was already on version 4. So we kind of said, well, no, we make iText 5. And since iText 5 in 2009, the license was the AGPL, which is a more viral license. So if you use iText in like a web context, and iText only lives on the server, but an end user triggers some process, and that process triggers iText, well, then all the source code that is using iText has to be AGPL too. So that was the big change. And what happened was that a lot of companies stopped upgrading. Like Google was using iText in calendar, in analytics, so in many different of their stuff. And so I think in calendar they still use the last LGPL version that was available back in 2009, and
Right.
they gradually changed to other libraries over the years. But changing to the AGPL really made a difference for iText, because I was still having my day job for the university. So I worked like from 9 to 5 at the university, and then 5 o'clock in the evening was 9 a.m. in California. So I then did my job for iText from 9 to 5 Californian hours. So I was the only one, together with a Portuguese guy who was like the co-developer of iText. So the moment we started making money, he didn't want to join the company, so I started paying him a monthly fee to help out. And but we were only 2 people developing iText, and it was only after we changed to the AGPL that we kind of start making more money. Like in 2010, it was already 700K, and then in the summer of 2011, we already had 1 million in revenue, and that's when we started to really hire people, hire developers, and it also made me some time to join the ISO committee for PDF, because I was just kind of implementing the standard. But by kind of joining the ISO committee in 2008, Adobe, so before 2008, PDF was a proprietary format. Adobe had
Right.
the copyright, but they granted everyone the right to use that copyright. And so they also had patents on a PDF, but they granted a non-exclusive right to use those patents on condition that the software you were writing was compliant with the standard. So they wanted to avoid
Okay.
like the first versions of JavaScript. You had a version from Netscape, you had a version from Microsoft, or TIFF. The TIFF format was also,
Oh,
you had many different flavors of TIFF, and Adobe wanted to avoid this, and that's why they kind of used their patents. As long as you kept true to the standard, you weren't infringing them patents. But the moment you did something wrong, they went after you. And there was a time where iText kind of, not intentionally, but there were some errors in iText, and then you had Leonard Rosenthal, who is I don't know what he is today, but he used to be Adobe's PDF architect. And then he said, Bruno, we have to talk. And you have an error there. And so then we fixed it. Of course, they never sued me. but I mean, changing to the AGPL, if we I everyone, there were a lot of people hating me for that move because they said iText is no longer free anymore.
What?
But
What?
yeah, but and so also I once was at a talk at FOSDEM, so in Brussels, the
Yep, another great show.
yeah, and so there were some people who were the authors of the AGPL on stage, and I asked a question, and he singled me out, and he said, "Well, your use of the AGPL is nefarious, and you shouldn't use the AGPL like that." And shut up. That there were a lot of politics involved regarding the die-hard open source people or free software people who claimed that everything should be free, and that was kind of a constant struggle because internally, the more we grew, the more salespeople we had, the more different people depending on iText for their living. Every board meeting, I had to defend myself against. We should make iText closed source because then we are going to make more money. And I said that you have to have the right balance, because if you make iText closed source or proprietary, then we are going to lose a lot of customers too. So that was a constant battle internally to keep it open source, and externally to kind of defend ourselves for using the AGPL.
And okay, so and in my mind, what you did was perfectly natural, and it's truly open. When we talk about open source, AGPL it's a GPL. It's a very good viral open source license. Nobody can argue that it's not. I can understand why some people didn't like losing their free commercial moneymaker, but that's their problem, not yours, and I completely understand that. And today, here we are today, fast forward, 15 years, and the discussion around open source looks very, very different. I think a lot of people would be very happy if AGPL was the worst thing they had to worry about,
Yeah, I know. So, it's difficult. So I notice there are people who say, well, open enough is okay for us, so we don't mind about the server-side public license. And then there are other people who, well, the open source initiative, who says, well, the SSPL isn't open source, the source code is, and it gets harder to explain to people that you can have source code that is open but not open source. So like I often. So I wrote a book, and people who read the book, they contact me and they ask me, can you give us guidance? And sometimes I have to help people who want to secure venture capital. And then you kind of have to explain to venture capitalists. There are, of course, special venture capitalists who are specialized in open source, but the more traditional ones, they still don't know what open source is about. I mean, for me, I already feel like I'm no longer up to date anymore. But then when I start talking with like a VC, it's like, I know way more than I thought I knew.
Right. By the way, before I forget, here's to Andrew Binstock. He's a very nice human being. He was the editor for the Oracle Java magazine, I think it was, or the Oracle.
Yeah. And before that, Dr. Dobbs Journal, and
I was a huge reader of Dr. Jobs. I had a subscription for 15 years, and then he did the Oracle Java one, and that was very interesting to me because it's Oracle, and he went out of his way. Remember, he's working for Oracle. He's getting a paycheck from Oracle. He went out of his way to have Spring in the magazine, right? To show the Java ecosystem is not just J2EE/Java EE and whatever. It was also Spring. It was also this wonderful, vibrant open source ecosystem. What a lovely human being.
Yeah, he's still a friend. So whenever I go to California, we meet. And he was a board member of iText group for a very long time. So I had on one hand a Belgian guy, Peter Kamps. He also had a couple of PDF companies. So we could talk PDF to each other. So during the board meeting, sometimes we were talking about PDF, and all the other people were kind of looking at this like, what are they talking about? But then, and Andrew was the ideal person to kind of, he understood developers, so he understood me, and he could translate what I wanted to the other board members who were more marketing, sales, financial, and vice versa. He knew the language of these other people, and he could kind of translate what the other people were asking me, because I remember the first board meetings were really hard for me, because they were telling me, you shouldn't do this, you should do that, and you're doing this wrong. And so after the board meeting, I said, haven't I done anything right? But they said, well, Bruno, you wanted the board because you wanted to professionalize your company, and so we are just giving you advice. And Andrew was really helpful in kind of telling me, don't worry, they just want to help you, and this is how they want to help you. And so he really taught me a lot about doing business, because I was really a very technical person. And
right. He's
yeah.
a daywalker. He's like Blade. He can do both
Yeah,
software and business, you know?
yeah, yeah.
That's another reference from the early 2000s for those who are of the right age. Okay, so you got into the business side of things. iText is now more successful. It's taking off. You've got a large organization. You said in 2011, I think you said you had a million recurring revenue. You know, like what then? Like where'd you go?
First, we wanted to kind of make sure that we were a real company, because at first I was just hiring the people that I knew, and it was like the startup mentality. Like I would say half a word, and then people would start coding, and that didn't always work. And so also we used salespeople on commission, and that was for the initial phase. That was interesting because we didn't have to pay a salary, and so at first, when you don't have any money, you cannot pay your salespeople. So
Right.
they were only paid if they sold something. But we also saw the disadvantages of working with salespeople on commission, because they went for the quick sale, and they didn't. So if I asked, hey, this customer, how are they using iText? Well, we're not paid to ask the customer how they are using iText. And
Right.
what really made kind of the what changed my mind about we need other salespeople was, there's this big bank in Belgium, KBC, and I saw a request coming in from KBC, but I didn't see the sale come through. And so I called the salespeople on commission, and I said, yeah, whatever happened with KBC? And they said, KBC doesn't ring a bell, can't have been important. Yeah, they probably weren't that interested. So I called KBC, because it was a Belgian company, and they
Right.
said, well, yeah, we were very interested in iText, but your salespeople, they just sent us like a couple of price lists, and they said, tell us what you need, and we'll make you an invoice. And so we didn't feel appreciated by our salespeople, and that was when I said,
No.
okay, we need dedicated salespeople. And so the dedicated salespeople, I really started kind of talking to customers, because before I only had conversations with iText users on free forums, so on the iText mailing list. And there's a big difference between a user who isn't paying, who says, I need, I don't know, I need Indian ligature, so I need to be able to write Hindi, and it has to render perfectly in a PDF. There's a big difference between a non-paying customer user who asks something, like you then write that code and you never hear from them. You don't
Right.
even get a thank you. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have a paying customer, and a paying customer has a request, like at some point, Northrop Grumman wanted to win a tender for a US government project, and they really needed PDF UA support, so universal accessibility for PDF forms. And because they were a good customer, we dropped everything. And so we didn't charge for the development, but we said we are going to make this a top priority on our on our roadmap, and we're going to build this for you so that you
Right.
can get this standard. And so that was one of the bigger changes. Like, how are we going to define our roadmap? We are going to define our roadmap on
By the customers.
real world needs from customers, and that's one type of professionalization that we introduced. And also, kind of, I was kind of the CEO, CTO, but I'm really not the guy who kind of I'm not the guy who is going to check everyone's code and so on, or going to see if that. So having someone to do that for me, that was Raf Hens, who was like the project leader of, who kept an eye on the roadmap, who made sure that the developers did what they were supposed to do. I was more, so I really like writing. So I was the one who, when the code was written, who wrote the manual. So I wrote 2 books for Manning publications, but then I also, after the second book, I started publishing manuals on LeanPub. LeanPub is like
I use it.
and so the thing was, customers, we gave them a voucher to get the book for free, and people who weren't a customer, they had to pay a minimal fee to get the book. And writing for me was also an exercise in what new features do we need. So the roadmap was defined on the one hand by what customers needed. On the other hand, I wanted to write a story, and if there were gaps in my story, I said, hey, we need that functionality, because otherwise there's a gap in my story, in my manual. And
Right.
that was like also kind of a quality control. And so building that company freed time for me, away from giving support, away from the day-to-day development, but gave me time to be part of the ISO committee. So read the specification before they were released, and like add stuff, like the extracting a TIFF from a PDF was really hard. And so I introduced an L attribute that tells the document how many bytes there are in the TIFF, because otherwise you couldn't really know that the end sequence of a TIFF, you had to guess. And so being able to I wrote parts of the section about digital signatures. So that was really interesting, because on the one hand, I had knowledge of the specification before it was written. On the other hand, by the time that the specification was released, we had a version of iText that not only implemented the specification, but also documented it. And then so
it's the hand drawing itself. MC Escher,
and yeah, indeed. It's like chicken or egg. So we put it in the spec, but before it's in the spec, we need to know if it works, stuff like that.
By the way, before we continue, I'm still stuck on what you said a few minutes ago, which was that nobody even said thank you, and I just wanted to say thank you. I have benefited from iText, and I know countless other people have as well. And thank you.
The fun thing was being at. I really like going to shows like Java One, and I remember there was a guy coming up to me, and that was one of the weirdest conversations I had. I said, "Do you know the deadliest catch?" And I said, "So that's
what."
One of the higher numbers on our TV. It's like where they go on the sea and they catch crabs and so we use iText, he said. And so apparently when the ship comes in, they weigh what they have caught, and then a proof of the weight of the proof of what they have caught is on a PDF, and that PDF was made with iText. And so those anecdotes that you have at conferences like that, those are the best. Those are really the best.
That's the greatest.
Yeah, and yeah, that's one of the non-tangible rewards of having written iText.
Countless cool use cases like that. Yeah. So okay, amazing. You obviously learned a lot through experience and through nice people like Andrew Binstock who are willing to help you. And obviously you are sort of you've been very successful. Obviously, I mean, again, Simon in our chat here mentioned, he said, who hasn't heard of iText? And the answer is, I don't think anybody has. I think everybody has heard of it, right? Everybody has. And from my perspective, I came at it again later on from the Spring side. It's very natural to want to render data in PDF, so it's a very nice capability to do that. What eventually, what happened to you and iText? I take it you're no longer there.
No. So in 2012, that was like, if people ask me what was the best age, that was 42. And in 2012, we were small enough to have a manageable company and big enough to kind of have a great living, because that was when I started traveling, started having time to do shows like DevOps or Java 1, Oracle World was it later on. And but it also took a toll on our family, in the sense that my wife and I, we were kind of, so there's this book, The Founder's Dilemmas, by Noam Wasserman, and he talks about there are two types of decisions. There are control decisions and there are wealth decisions. And he looks at those decisions and he says, well, there are the founders and the roles, rewards, and responsibilities, and control decisions, you keep them with you, whereas wealth decisions, you kind of give away control. And the same with hires, the same with openness to external capital, and so on. And I read this book in 2013, and I noticed that my wife and I, we were kind of taking control decisions, in the sense that everything had to pass through us. So if we were traveling and a document needed to be signed, and back then it wasn't all digital signing yet, but when a document needed to be signed and we were in the US for 2 weeks, could be that document was waiting for us for 2 weeks. And Noam Wasserman, he says, well, it's very tempting to try. So if you take control decisions, you can be king of your company, but you will never reach the full potential of your company. Whereas if you take wealth decisions, you won't be king, because you will have hand out control, but your company will be able to kind of grow. So if control decisions, they limit your growth. And he said it's very tempting to combine both. Everyone wants to be Larry Ellison. Everyone wants to be Bill Gates. Those are king and rich. But those, we all know them because they are the exceptions. Most of the times, if you try to combine wealth decisions with control decisions, it's a recipe for failure. And so we looked at this, and we said, at some point, we said, iText is like a cat. You don't own a cat; the cat owns you. It felt like we didn't own iText. iText owned us. There were like days that I just had flown to Seattle for 5 days, and then I already had to fly to Berlin, and I was never home. And we have 2 sons, and my wife and I were together in the company, and we said, well, either so if we want to really grow, it's some VCs were telling us go big or go home, or either you're at the table or you're on the menu, and we thought, well, what do we need to do? And so we hired Duff Johnson. He is now one of the people at the PDF Association and the ISO committees for PDF. I think he's the CEO of the PDF Association. I don't remember. Duff Johnson, we hired him, and we said, well, what should we do? And option 0 was get out. We are going to sell our company, but we weren't ready to sell. So we didn't even know I didn't even know what the term recognized revenue meant. So I was tax people, they made our tax return forms, but I didn't really know what it all meant. And so you really need to know all these numbers if you want to sell a company. So that was option 0. Option 1 was, let me check, was milk it. We have a good business. I think we had 7 employees, and we had a good revenue, so we were double-digit EBITDA. And so we could have just said, we're going to just continue like we are doing. Option two was pedal to the metal. So we had some interest from VCs who were looking for opportunities, and we went to these VCs to talk about iText, and we used those VCs for free consultancy, in the sense like, if you would work with us, what would you do for us? And so everything they said, we made a checklist, and we eventually went for option three, which was the drive it strategy. And drive it was do what the VCs told us they would do for us, but do it ourselves. So we changed so we had BV, which is something like an LLC, and we changed it to an NV in Belgium, which is like more a corporation. So the difference is that we made a change in the corporate type, so that it would be easier for external capital to join. And
I see.
we hired so we had an an accountant in Belgium, and we had an accountant in the US, and they both talked English, but they didn't talk the same language. So we changed to an accountant that was active globally, so that we wouldn't have any discussions there. And so we really cleaned up house and installed a board of directors. And I remember the first real board meeting was in January 2014. And I remember saying, this board will be a failure if we don't have an exit within 3 years, because my wife and I really wanted to kind of explore other things. And so with the board, we changed a lot of things. Like, we went from the salespeople we had were very well in responding to customers, but we changed to more strategic salespeople who kind of were more proactive, and like, for instance, they would go to a customer and ask, how many types of PDF vendors are you paying invoices to? And some were as many as a dozen. So they had a dozen different PDF vendors, and they had this vendor for that aspect, this vendor for that aspect, and so on. And then the salespeople
Why
would
not
say,
consolidate?
well, why not standardize on iText, so that you only have to pay one invoice, and the sum of all the invoices you are paying now will be it will be way less expensive than if you just pay the one iText invoice. And
Right.
so they really thought more strategically. And so that was also one of the reasons why iText really grew fast. So we won the fast in Belgium. We were third place in the Fast 50. So Deloitte has a technology Fast 50, and we were third place in Belgium in 2013, first place in 2014, and second place in 2015. So 3 years in a row, we were in the top 3 of fastest growing technology companies in Belgium. And so then we kind of had an M&A consultant, and they found 2 possible buyers. And one was a buyer who said, we are going to kill Adobe, we are going to be the biggest. And it was
Ooh.
like, no, I want to be friends with Adobe. I've always
Yeah.
been friends with Adobe. We are on the same
Yeah.
page where we want to go to technology wise. And the other one was Hancom. That's a South Korean company, who had all kinds of support for the office suites. Like, they had their own version of Word, they had their own version of PowerPoint and Excel. And I thought it would be a good match because they didn't have anything PDF related.
Right.
But I really underestimated the difference in culture. Like, their software development team, they were using all the terminology of agile, but they weren't really working agile. It was really top down, and so we really struggled to kind of find synergies. That's just one example. There are other examples of how we had different views on customers. Like, I wanted to invest in something called Ditto, that was design interactive templates online. So iText was a library that lived on the server, but we didn't have any services, and I wanted to move to services, and and
Ah.
and and they were still selling. Uh, uh, they were selling like their suite, but that was on DVDs, on CDs that they were selling it. And they said, "Is there really a future in SaaS?" And I said, "Which year are we in?"
What?
Yeah. So there were a lot of things that went.
This question to the guy who was building a SaaS grade management system in the
Yeah,
90s.
and I already was kind of unhappy that we were missing the train with iText, but of course, yeah. But then something happened with that company in the sense that they were buying a lot of companies, but they were always using money from private equity players to buy
Uh-oh.
companies, and they had bought another company, and suddenly the valuation of that company had been cut in half, and one of the private equity investors had a put option. So that private equity player said, "Well, we are going to force you, Hancom, to buy all our shares at the initial value." But the value was already half, and they had a liquidity problem. And they looked at their portfolio and they saw, "Oh, we have this really fast growing company here, iText. Why wouldn't we sell that company?" And they sold their part, but they wanted to force me to sell my shares along with them, and at the price that they defined. And then I went to court, and we had a battle in court for 1 year and a half, and then we settled, and that's when I sold my remainder of shares. So it was a really bumpy ride.
Whoa.
So Hancom owned 3/4 of the shares starting in December 2015, and then in 2018 September I was kicked out of the office because I sued them, and then I they also used the call option to kind of buy a fifth of my shares. So I ended up with 18.88% of the shares. And then in 2012, just before COVID hit, we settled, and I sold the remaining.
2020 or 19.
2020, sorry,
Yeah.
2020. Yeah, it was February 2020, and so
Yeah.
in March everything closed down here in 2020,
Same.
and so that's how I left iText, not really in an elegant way, but then iText got sold again to PDFtron in April 2022, and the first thing that happened was the CEO who called me and said, "Could you give a keynote at our first event of the thing?"
Oh.
And so that was like an elegant ending, because then I gave a keynote about the history of open source and iText.
Wow. What a journey. It's and you wrote a book, and that book is Entrepreneured. Oh, there it
Entrepreneur.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
That tells some of the story that we just heard.
yeah, and much more. So
Wow. I have a book to read. It's the winter. The fall and the winter are here in the northern hemisphere, and the days are shorter, and I have a need for something to read because I won't be able to go outside as long. So that'll be a book I want to get.
yeah.
I your story is amazing. What are you doing now? I mean, when I messaged you, you were very kind, very polite. You helped me out, but then you said, "Look, I'm very happy to have a conversation with you, strange person that I haven't talked to in forever. But don't bother me for a couple weeks. I'll be doing a film festival."
Film marathon. Yeah. So it goes back to when we were students. My wife and I, we really loved movies, and so in '94 and '95 we went to the film festival in Ghent for the first times. And when I say we went
Yeah.
to the film festival, that means that we have like a pass that we can start watching movies. The first screening is at 9 a.m. and the last screening is at 10:30 p.m. And so when we were younger, we watched 6 movies a day during 10, 11 days. Now we're a little bit older, so in the last film festival in Ghent, we watched 53 and 1/3 movies. So that's an average of about 5 movies a day that we saw. And yeah, so it's a hobby that got out of hand because so we we had this exit, and suddenly people started asking us, "Hey, we're making this cool movie. Wouldn't you invest in this movie?" So then we sponsored some movies. It's not real investments because we haven't seen any euros back from those movies. But now we have a movie that won prize after prize. It won a special mention at the Berlinale. So this also allowed us to go to Berlin to the film festival. We were also able to go to the film festival in Cannes. Because so Ghent and Berlin and South by Southwest and CineQuest in San Jose, those are film festivals open to the public. But in Cannes, you only can go if you're an industry, if you're in the industry. And so another thing we did was we have very few art house cinemas in Flanders. And at some point, one of the art house cinemas in Ghent was about to be sold to be changed into a hotel or a restaurant. And so my wife and I, we bought it with the intention to renovate it. So we are now looking at architects to renovate it. One problem is that the people who we have the lease contract is until December 2028, and the people who are now running the movie theater, they don't want to renovate. So we might have to wait until 2028. But another project we're in is the Winter Circus. So back in the 19th century, you had like a stone circus in the middle of the city.
I have a question
for elephants and stuff like that.
I have a question first. What was the name of the movie you said that was winning all these prizes?
Sea Sparkle. I think Sea Sparkle.
SEA?
So the C,
yeah,
SEA, and then Sparkle.
Movie. Okay, so
it's
like, oh, look at that. Okay, drama, family, hour and 40 minutes. I will find a link and I'll paste it in here about this. Wow, it's got good reviews too.
It's about a girl who loses her father at sea, and everyone goes through a mourning process, but she is convinced that a monster was responsible for the death of her father, and so let's see.
That's awesome. I will watch that. Is that available only on? I mean, where do I watch it? Can I stream it or can I buy it?
I think it's premiered in Chicago last week or this week, so I don't know if it's available on streaming already in the US. It also won a prize in Iran, but the director didn't want to go to Iran because that would be a problem. But it's fun to.
Congrats! That's a really cool looking movie.
Yeah. But I was talking about the Winter Circus, which it used to be a permanent circus in Ghent, and it got abandoned, and the city of Ghent renovated it and put out a tender for people who want to kind of do something with the Winter Circus. And we joined a consortium of all tech entrepreneurs who had an exit, and we put a lot of money together, and we are now turning this into a technology hub for startups. And so there's an initiative, Flanders Technology and Innovation, that starts next year in March. And the opening event will be at the Winter Circus. And so that's where we will kind of, that one of the problems that I had when I started my business was I was in open source in Belgium, and I couldn't talk to anyone because the only person that I knew in Belgium that was doing open source was Dries Buitaert, Drupal. And so he's in the book too. We compared notes. And so he's actually, he had his doctorate using Java. So Drupal is PHP, but he's actually a Java guy. And so that was one of the only persons I could talk to. And what we noticed was you can hire all these big five people to get advice, but
Bruno,
they don't know anything about your business.
I have a non-related question. Does Drupal mean anything in Dutch or Flemish or?
It's a drop. So druppel.
So
it's a misspelling of druppel. Druppel is the drop, and so you have the Drupal.
Okay, it's almost 2024, and this is the first time I learned that. Okay. Never mind. So, okay,
And
good.
so,
Big
so
five.
the idea of the winter circus is to kind of shortcut. So if starters have a question, bring them in contact with people who have hands-on experience and who are
Right.
really in the business, rather than have them search through kind of incubators where the main goal is to kind of real estate, come here, have your office here, we'll charge you by the month, and we'll give you advice, but that advice isn't always up to date. And so the winter circus is a place where we will have events, and people talk like, I have a talk about IP, about licensing, about it's not because you find code online in the open that you can use it. You it's
Yeah.
it's proprietary because the guy who wrote it forgot to add some license information, stuff like that. Stuff about valuation. I have a talk that I give about where I make a table of contents of my book, but not with the chapters, but with two graphs, the psychological value that we attributed to iText. Like if we would sell iText, that is what we would kind of ask, and then the calculated value. So at some points in time, we went to kind of specialized people who made a valuation, and so the graph at some point intersects, and that's the point where we sold the company. So all that stuff is in talks, and so all the members of the consortium are all people who have been in the business or are still in the business, and who have all these stories like this.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so it sounds like you took your journey and made it so that it can help others on their journey, which is a wonderful thing to do, and it's one of the reasons why I respect you so very much. Um, are you? You know, I think we're wrapping up here. Is there anything I have forgotten to mention, or that we have forgotten to mention?
I don't think so. We were going to talk for 40 minutes, and it's already double. So
It's been great for me. I'm sorry to have kept you. I appreciate that
no,
dinner is
no,
probably waiting for you.
it's gotten dark.
It's gotten really bright here. The sun is reflecting off of a skyscraper nearby. So, okay, are you online? And if so, do you want to be found? And if so, where can people find you?
People use the easiest way to contact me is through LinkedIn. I think that's how you connected to me, isn't it?
Probably.
Because then you can see when I've seen your message. If you just send a mail, I get a lot of mail, and I try to answer every mail, but sometimes mails get lost, and it's easier if you use LinkedIn, not with the standard message, but with an explanation. And I mean, I get a lot of spam on LinkedIn, but refer to a talk like this, because
I just asked to connect.
Nine times out of 10 people want to sell me something on LinkedIn. So there's a real plague of lifestyle coaches now in Belgium. So I know your life is stressful and you're in business, but we can help you with our. You only need half an hour a week, and we have a program for you, or these, like, we can. Get you to an exclusive resort with only CEOs, only people of your. Why would I go to a resort with only CEOs? That's like a nightmare for me. So I get all these requests on LinkedIn. So if you connect, make sure that you add something that I recognize that it's not something that you try to sell me like that.
No. I okay. So LinkedIn, can I paste your profile here in the
Yeah, that's okay.
in the chat, and then I've invited you to connect. I hope respectfully that you'll connect with me someday.
I closed all my other windows, so
No problem. But I just that's one. Let's see. Here we go. People seem to have enjoyed the conversation. I sure did. Thank you so much for iText, for taking the time to educate, to lead, to build a business, to help others, to lift others, and to be here today. I appreciate it very much, Bruno.
Thank you for having me on your show. So it's been a while. I really miss getting on the stage. So that's the one thing that I miss most, and that's why I joined the Winter Circus Consortium, because that will give me the opportunity to talk to people.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to. I mean, yours is. There are very few people on the planet who can share the kinds of things you can share. So it's very, very good. I'm very excited. And people, look, do you see this comment from our user here in the chat, Ambu? Thank you for the very nice message there.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a good
Bye.
day.
Thank you.